Yo, welcome back to another video. Now in today's video, it will be a bit of a little different one. Now this is something that it's about a unit that I was going to do an in-depth video on, but I ended up scrapping it unfortunately. So I'll do a little mini kind of thing on how I use this unit. And of course that unit is Kaguya, if you can see her in my team. Now, first things first, this is the actual team that I use when I use my Kaguya. Pretty much just using units that I would either just place down and forget about, or I'd get basically Sukuna up to his full AoE and that would be pretty much it. I actually just got Sukuna Monarch today, so before I was still using Sukuna, even non-Monarch. I'll just have him at full AoE just for that bleed, but that is pretty nice. Let's go over basically what she does first. So she has dimensions that buff herself and also buff allies depending on the typing. We have fire, water, and blast. If you do specific combos, you can get different things. My favorite combo is to go ice, sand, ice, sand. The reason why I start ice instead of sand first, it is a longer setup, but just pairing it with that first passive that she has where she increases her damage by 20% per new activation on a dimension. If you have sand as the second activated dimension, that means she's getting a 40% buff instead of a 20% buff. Of course, it does mean that it does take a longer setup. It's only a longer setup on the first initial time you go through it, so that is why I prefer doing ice sand instead of going from sand ice sand to get that buff. Now what I mean by sand and ice combo, if ice is the previous dimension when you activate sand, that means you're buffing all allies by 30%. This also includes herself, and then she also has the 30% buff to blast allies, so she would be getting a 60% buff when you go ice into sand. But if sand was the previous dimension before ice, that means the next dimension after ice will get a 50% increase to buffs. So if you go sand ice sand, instead of buffing for 60%, she's now buffing for 90% damage, which is very good. Really good for herself, especially when you pair it with her nuke. Fire is like okay. Honestly, the ways that you'd really only use her is going between ice and sand, or just using auto, going from fire ice sand. That is pretty much the two ways that you would play her, is keep it on auto and let it do its thing, or you manually go between sand and ice. And then if you didn't know, like haven't gotten her yet, she can obtain elements from your own team that you have. So I have a specific team what I run with her. I like to run a blast, a water, and a fire type unit, and I will also like an unknown unit. This is why I use John Smith, because he is a blast and unknown typing, compared to if you were to use Sung Jin Woo, where Sung Jin Woo would only be an unknown typing. Then you'll need to put in a different unit for that blast typing. That is why I use my John Smith. I actually don't really place him down even though I have Monarch on him. I did get Monarch on him this update as well. The only reason why is because he is used pretty regularly for tournaments specifically. This is why I went for Monarch on him. I don't think I'd ever use him outside of tournaments, but yeah, that is why I use my John Smith, my fire type unit. Now there are two ways about going this. You can either use Smith, or I prefer using Quetzalcoatl, because Quetzalcoatl is a 20% fire buff on placement within her range. So typically when I do go to use my Quetzalcoatl, I'll just place her down next to my Kaguya when I'm about to nuke, just so she can get that additional buff, and I'll place a Fu on her just so instead of it being a 20% buff, in this instance it is a 34% buff, or it's actually meant to be a 33. It's because we're getting also an additional 1% buff for having a fire element unit in range, so it's a 34% buff, which is cool. But yeah, that is why I use Quetzalcoatl over a Smith, because it costs 13,000 or 13,500 to place him and max him out, and I would much rather go ahead and place down a Sukuna and then use that money to upgrade and get him to his full AoE, because I think that is a lot more worth than spending that money onto putting it into Smith. And then water unit, there is pretty much only one option I see that is worth using, and that is Weatherman, because he is just an insane unit, especially giving that 30% bubbled, and also I guess the slow is okay, but it is mainly because of that bubbled effect. That is the only reason why this unit is so good. Super cheap, full placement, bubbled effect. Only a reason why I always use this unit. If I can use him in a team, I will always have him in my team. And then of course we have Sukuna with his most recent familiar. He is just a demon, a powerhouse. He does crazy damage himself, and he provides the curse element to Kaguya for that 30% more damage when attacking bosses, and then also the 30% buff that comes from his familiar itself just perfectly synergizes with Kaguya, giving her that curse and giving her that 30% buff. Also, this used to be my flexible spot. I'd put anyone that I would want in here. If I needed CC, I'd put them in here. If I needed bleed, I'd put them in there, or if I wanted some more buffing, I would put them in the spot. But Sukuna has now now filled that because he can buff, he provides curse element, and he also does bleed. So that fills every slot that I need. We don't really care too much about needing CC exactly because Kaguya's doing way more than enough damage, which I'll show very shortly. Actually, let's start working on it now, just so I can show you. And then our last unit that we do use is Speedwagon. I use him with a silly fairy. This is because I just think it's better than placing one Takarota down, even though Takarota does give more yin overall when you do max him out. My Speedwagon is extremely cheap to max out because of my silly fairy that I have compared to needing to max out a single Takarota. Of course, like I said, it is less overall income, but because we are spending significantly less money overall to get them to their max, I feel like it does provide more money within a short time frame. I feel like Speedwagon is a lot better than Takarota. But yeah, going through and getting her dimensions up, we can showcase what her maximum damage is with this setup that I have. If I were to max her out already, just with a Sukuna and also having got that Fu buff on her, I'll place down the Quetzalcoatl next to her. We're already at 1 million damage. We can get ever so slightly higher if we cycle through ice and sand once again, which I'll get to right now. Let me just cut real quick so we aren't waiting. All right, so now we are back. Now we will showcase her at her maximum buff when we go ahead and do sand for the last time. But first, let's spawn in a enemy and showcase basically the damage that we can do with her nuke. So we have 83 million damage on our Vegeta right now. She has already done 4 million damage. This was before because I actually spawned in a different boss, but we did not have enough HP, so had to skip over that. But let's go ahead and activate her final dimension. This is sand. She's at 1.1 million damage here, so her nuke would actually be doing 11 million. But because we have the 30% coming from curses, and then we can also get 30% from bubble effect, place all of them just to make sure we are applying a bubble. That means that the nuke will actually be doing 17 million damage instead, which is really insane. This is like one of the highest damage nukes in the game because of the different things that you can stack together with her, that being cursed, that being bubbled. We have just Sukuna being crazy good in this game now, an amazing rework, and then also Quetzalcoatl just for that 20%. Of course, you could probably get a bit better if you are using a smith, but for shorter content, I think she is a lot better because it's simply you place her down next to Kaguya when you're about to nuke, and you can do a lot of damage that way. So yeah, that is the small showcase on how you would basically use her. It does cost not too much at all. If we were to actually go over basically the costs of this team, you are looking at the costs of Kaguya by herself. That is 151,000 to max her out, and then basically placing down a Sukuna, placing down a Quetzalcoatl, placing down maybe one or two weather reports, and that's all the total cost for this team to be able to do crazy amounts of damage with her alone. Of course, we also have Speedwagon and maxing him out, but I won't put in the total cost for that. Relatively cheap for a lot of damage that she can deal. Now, just to showcase this team in action, I'm going to go into a couple different stages just to showcase what she can do. Before we do get into the stages real quick, I did forget to mention what familiar I had on my Kaguya, so I'll quickly just showcase that. I have this familiar. This is a 43.5% increase damage for my Kaguya, which is very insane. It is extremely good, and one of the reasons why I extremely love Strange Cats, because no other familiar is boosting a unit's damage by 43% damage. It's pretty insane. All right, so we are just going to start off in the deep end and go straight into Guilty Gear's extreme stage, seeing if we can beat this, which I am pretty certain that we can. I don't think there really is any stage that we can't do with this team. We'll see. I definitely did not attempt this before and accidentally sold my Kaguya while trying to get the armored stocks down. So yeah, there was that, but we'll ignore that. That never happened. Pretty much starting off the same as my traitless strat. I'd like to just place down a single weather report here on this corner just so we can slow these first initial enemies. Now, I usually do place my Sukuna here, but I think I'm going to move him up here because we want to get money as soon as possible. So having him up here will be nice so we can start farming faster, and from there we can place down our Kaguya faster. Most of the time when I do these, it is recording after I have done the stages because I actually never know whether or not I am going to beat it, but I am pretty certain that this time around I will not lose. So go ahead and take out all of the armored stocks on our Gleeful Disorder. Now, the way to go about doing it is you just need unique placements hitting him. So the easiest way is to sell and replace your cheapest unit. Now I can see that we are leaking because I'm not in full AoE. We'll go ahead and go full AoE. I am in thrice as well actually, so that is another reason why, but we'll go ahead and start upgrading our Kaguya right now. Kill that unit, go into ice, and it looks like Sugin is going to do more than enough damage to Gleeful Disorder himself, so I don't actually need Kaguya to be attacking him at all, which is pretty nice. Who knows, maybe I could actually do this with Sukuna Monarch solo. We'll see. Maybe I might make a video on that too. Just a fairly simple stage. Now the stage is not difficult at all. Just need to make sure to remove the armored stocks. That is pretty much the only thing, just so your units are actually dealing full damage. Alright, so from here, sell all of my farms. I think pretty much all of my weather reports got removed, so we'll just do everybody. I will place down a John Smith to get rid of all these, but now let's go ahead and focus on getting all of these armored stocks off this enemy or off the boss. And then from there, we should be able to nuke. Pretty simple. Alright, now I'm going to just place all these guys down. Where's my Kaguya at? Go activate you, activate the nuke. Should clear out the boss. Nearly. Pretty close. But that's it. That is the first stage of the difficult stages completed. Now we just need to go ahead and clean up the rest of the enemies, which should not be too bad at all. There we go. That is the first one done. Now we'll move on to another difficult stage. Alright, so now we are moving on to the next one. I think I actually don't want to run champion, but we will. So I did just realize something. When I went to go nuke with Kaguya in the previous one, I actually did not even place Quetzalcoatl down. Now, the thing is with Smith, I do know that there is the Fu bug with him, so I can just place him down with Fu on him and give a sword, and it will give a really high buff anyway on the unit. But I don't really want to be using it too often because it's a bug and it is going to get patched eventually. So I guess I can use it while it is available, but like it's not something that you can really constantly rely on most of the time. So that is why I'm not using Smith. Kind of looking at Smith as if the Fu bug never existed on him, where you wouldn't really be using him on placement and then putting that 5% damage sword on her. So that's the only reason why I'm not using him over a Quetzalcoatl. This will be another simple stage, unless I think maybe if a crystal spawns earlier. That is the only other thing that could potentially mean that it would be a bit more annoying, but go ahead and start upgrading our Kaguya. Do need to place down a couple of units though, just so we can get rid of our Erin's armored stocks when it does come up. It's right there. Place down 2 more. I don't need to remove all of them. She should do enough damage. Alright, moving on to the next bosses, which should be pretty simple. Not much talking this time around because there really isn't any difficulty with this stage, especially when you do have a Kaguya. Kaguya was definitely the premium unit to use when this stage first came out, so yeah, there's not really any difficulties here, although this Levi did leak, which I'll just place down a Sukuna. Should clear that out. Alright, and now the final boss is spawned out, but what we're going to do is we're just going to wait for all of the enemies to spawn. I guess I can just nuke right now, but wait for all of the enemies to spawn and then nuke, because it doesn't really change too much. It will like save like maybe a second or so. Okay, all the enemies have spawned. Now I nuke, and that should end it. There we go. That is another quote-unquote difficult stage that we have beaten. On to the next one. Alright, now we're into Act 2 of the Cid Raid. Now this one, it's kind of obvious that we are going to beat it, so it's more or less how fast we can beat it. I have done a couple of attempts to see if I can get really close to beating it, or how fast I can beat it. So we'll see if I can beat Escanor's time. My fastest Escanor time on this stage, I think, is like 4 minutes and 10 seconds. I'm pretty sure. So let's see how close we can get to beating that time with this team. It is kind of close. I think I can get it close. I just need to know when to nuke. That's all I need to know. But yeah, I'll speed run through this because this is not too difficult at all. It just will take a little bit of time. All right, we ended up getting 4 minutes and 50 seconds. Now, during that time, Kaguya actually, I think it was during the first immunity phase, Kaguya teleported over to this pillar. So I think I want to retry, see if I can get faster, but 4 minutes and 50 seconds is not too bad, but I'll be back and see if I can get a slight quicker time than what I had before. All right, we did get slightly better. We're at 4:30. Now, it did happen once again, so I'm actually going to run it back one more time and see if I can get slightly quicker. But yeah, it is around the similar time that you can complete the stage with Escanor, which is pretty nice. Ooh, there we go. We ended up getting 4 minutes and 14 seconds, which is pretty close to, I think, my fastest Escanor time, which is pretty cool. I think I can make it a lot better if I play around with the timings when it comes to using her dimensions, but it is pretty decent indeed. Now, I did do this a couple times, so yeah, that was about it. But yeah, that was the third difficult stage that we have done. On to the last one that I will do, which is the dungeon. All right, on to the final one, and that is doing the dungeon that we have. It's not really that hard anymore. It's the only reason why it is hard is because of the many paths that we do have. Now, it would probably be difficult with Kaguya by herself, but I'm not really going to be doing that. I'm just showcasing the team that I use with Kaguya and the power that it has with it. So I'll see how many reward cards I can actually stack rather than going for all of the cards that make it a whole lot easier to do. So yeah, let's just go ahead and speed run through this stage because there really isn't too much to it. How long did it take for this ad to spawn? Come on, boss. I know you want to spawn already. Am I literally waiting a whole minute? All right, there we go. Boom, boom. Then where are you at? Boom, 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 boom. That should be it. Easy. Yeah, but that's about it. That is team that I like to use when I play with Kaguya. It is a very strong team. You don't need to really worry about upgrading too many people outside of maybe getting Yasukuna to that full AoE. You do not need to have Monarch at all on him. And then basically Kaguya is the main unit of this team and she can perform very well. But yeah, that is going to be me. I appreciate it if you guys have watched this far through the video. See ya.